everyone, welcome back to the Kirkpatrick podcast. It is Vanessa, and today we are going to be talking about why this one question is probably the worst question that we should be asking, and that is, did it work? Now, I know that for many of you, you're probably thinking, why is that the worst question to be asking? Because that's essentially what we want to know, right? Did what it is that we did actually work? And I think that, when we think about the question, did it work? It sounds efficient, right? It's essentially what we want to know. It signals there's some sort of accountability and it feels decisive, right? But today I actually want to argue this case, and feel free to think differently from me. But did it work is usually, most often, pretty much 100% of the case of the time, the least helpful question that we could ask. And not because it's actually wrong, but because it shuts down all of the possibilities just way too quickly and what we could actually learn from asking the right questions. When we think of did it work, there's one question or one answer that comes from it, right? Yes or no. It feels very binary and it's decisive. Yes, it worked. No, it didn't. And yet we have this actual understanding that there's so much more to learning than just yes or no, or, the training was the solution. So many leaders are under pressure. Learning departments, you have to decide pretty quickly, did something work? Did it not? Should we redo it again? Because you're on to the next program. You're on to the next initiative. You're on to the next thing. And leaders are the same way. They have to make really fast decisions. A new initiative gets put in front of them, and they have to decide whether or not it's something to invest in or if they have to cut from somewhere else. Leaders need to reduce ambiguity. There's a lot of ambiguity in the human capital space these days, or just always has been, and that makes people uncomfortable. Everyone really loves clarity and they love decisions. And leaders are always under pressure to justify their investments. Whether or not you have a board or other executives to answer to, or investors or things like that, even for me, I still have to justify every single dollar spent, because I sit here and I think, well, that dollar could definitely be used in a completely different way or in a different place. Or if we had used it here, would have gotten more of an ROI. And these binary questions, these yes or no questions, they offer for us closure. They offer this kind of psychological relief that we're looking for, and a sense of control. And I get that this desire for closure is totally understandable. You're talking to a person that loves to check off a box. I love to know that my to-do list is getting shorter, although I actually don't think I have ever seen my to-do list get shorter. I just take things off and then add other things on. So if that's you too, thank you for being my people. And when we have this closure of, yeah, it worked, or no, it didn't, we lose something really big that we actually really need to make better investments in the future. See, when we think about this binary sort of thinking, it assumes that performance is immediate. You learn something and you perform right away. It assumes that context doesn't matter and that success looks exactly the same no matter what. And in reality, performance unfolds over time. You need to practice skills in order to get better at them, to get more efficient at them, more effective at it. Behavior varies by the environment, right? So what works in one sort of setting might not work in another. And systems actually shape outcomes. And real performance doesn't behave like a light switch. It behaves like a system. And it's not something that you can just turn on and off. We think about all that we lose, we don't find out with this binary thinking what changed and what didn't. Where did people struggle? What supported performance? And what made success harder than expected? And instead, we get this one single label of, yeah, that initiative worked. Okay, great. But why did it work? Right? Was it because we had manager support? Was it because we had, job aids to support people after the fact? Is it because we had coaching sessions after the fact? We have to know these things to be able to then craft the right performance systems, right? And even if we look at, and we get these questions all the time, what's the ROI? What's the ROI? I mean, if we are just calculating things again by just a number, that is also binary thinking. It says, this is the number, and that is it. And it, again, does not take into account all of these other factors that influence performance and behavior. And once you get this single label, that's then the conversation ender, right? Like, yep, it worked. Okay, great. On to the next thing. But that's not evaluation. That's closure. So, when you think about kind of how does this look, how can I reframe this? What I want you to think about is, how can I reframe the question and go a little bit deeper and say a yes and or no and. And how many times can I say and? Don't take a drink every time I say and, because that will probably not be safe for anybody today. But it's not a yes or no, right? It's a yes and or a no and. And when you have the opportunity to say, here, all of the factors that helped influence whether or not something worked or influence that it didn't work, you have now moved away from being an order taker, just being seen as a learning function, to a performance consultant. And that's the shift that needs to be made. No longer can we provide these reports that give you no actual information. It gives you numbers. It gives you just an after the fact what happened. Instead, it has to give you more insight into the why behind things. That's the only way that we are going to grow and scale organizations. Data without the narrative behind it is just not helpful. And when a leader comes to you, and this will never not happen, they're going to ask, did it work? You're going to need to give them the yes and or the no, and here's why. Because the verdict at the end of the day doesn't actually help. There still has to be decisions made, and the organization has no more data to help them make that decision. If you cut something, right, you could cut something that's absolutely vital that just needed other tweaks, or you could cut something and not actually provide the right information or the right data points to help actually make better decisions, right? and actually solve performance problems. So no, the leadership development program that we paid $1 million for didn't work. And the reason is because we had no follow-up support. We had no coaching support. We had no manager support. We had no mentors to guide these potential leaders. We stuck them in a course and then we sent them on their way, hoping that they were going to be absolutely transformed. These are the things that they were missing, and these are the things that they needed. And now that is more information and insight that a leader can actually action on. Now I know next time I make an investment in a program or an initiative, I need to look at, what does the support look like after the fact? What does the whole package look like that we're getting? We're spending this much on content, but what we actually need are all of these other things. Where are all of these other things? How am I going to find the money to budget for those things? That is what leaders actually need, and that's what organizations actually are going to thrive on. And when stakes are high, leaders, they don't need verdicts. What they need is guidance. I need it. I asked the team for it, I'm not as in the trenches as they are and in the data as they are. Now I can get in there, don't get me wrong. But I also don't need to be. I don't have that much time to be, right? And so I look to them when we go to make a decision to add something, change something, if we need a new whatever it is, it's up to them to tell me, this is what we need and here's why. I need guidance. I need support. So that I can take that and know what I know about everything else happening in the organization, about what I see for the future, for the company, for learning, for all of us. And then I can make a better decision. But if they just told me yes or no, I could make the wrong decision over and over and over again. And this is where the Kirkpatrick model actually is often misunderstood. See, too often people just want to know, what's the ROI? Did the program work or did it not? And the levels were never meant to just answer one question. They were meant to surface different kinds of questions and answers. What are people experiencing? What do they know and believe? What are they doing differently in actual real work? And what's changing over time as a result of that? And all of that information gives such a better picture and such a better, for lack of a better word as I'm talking here, report back to the organization, right? To then help them decide what it is that they want to change, what they want to keep, what they want to add to other initiatives to ensure success. Because we know that any initiative, whether it's training or not, has a multitude, a hodgepodge of pieces to it, right, that make it successful. But if we don't actually know what those pieces are, we can't replicate it, and we just keep making the wrong decisions over and over and over again. And when the levels are treated as questions rather than just checkbox, like, yep, I did the level 1, yep, I did the level 2, yep, level 3, yep, level 4, evaluation becomes exploratory instead of judgmental. And you know that one of the key foundational principles for Kirkpatrick is evaluation is iterative. It's going to continue to feed the organization. It's here to help us continuously improve. We're constantly trying to improve and innovate and scale and grow. This is the way to do it. Explore. We're not, if you think of like a lawsuit, right? We're the ones hanging out in discovery. We're not the ones that are the judge or the jury. But oftentimes we are treated like the judge and the jury when in fact we're just there to help you do discovery and to make decisions from there. Inside of the Kirkpatrick Collective, we often begin by replacing this concept of did it work? Because a lot of people come into our world, into our universe, into our programs wanting to know, having that binary thinking and just wanting to know, like, did it work, yes or no? What's the ROI of this program? And instead, we're replacing that language with what specifically changed? Where did we see performance breakdown? What made success easier or harder? And these questions help to slow conversations down. They increase understanding and improve decisions. And then we can show up as the leader, as the expert, as the go-to person in the organization that can help unlock performance. We no longer are looked at as a content factory. And guess what? AI is coming for our content. And that part of our jobs, I hate to say this, I just don't see it lasting very, very long. As much as I would love to see a bit of a slowdown, I think, because I think there's a lot about AI we don't know and we have to be careful of. It moves at such a speed that it will be producing our content much quicker than we ever could have thought or predicted. But see, this piece of it, where we are actually giving more of that human insight as to what changed, where did the performance break down, what helped make success happen. That insight is things that we can only provide. Yeah, AI can help do the initial analysis, but they're still always going to need us there to help provide, that guidance from the beginning. And now we can pull together, imagine having the ability to say, these are the things that work when we have these conditions. You have all of this data that tells you this. And now I can go into a system and say, this is my challenge. Here's the people that I'm working with. Here's what I'm thinking, here's what our outcomes are. And then the system can give you back the data based on all of the past things that have worked. Okay, well, you're going to want to do this. You're going to need to do this. Watch out for this. You're going to have manager support. Here's the change management plan that we recommend because it worked really, really well for this initiative. Now you can knock it out of the park every single time. I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like I'm almost reinventing the wheel when it comes to, creating new content, new learning experiences. Even if I'm using a template, even if I'm using a some sort of like standardized, out of the box sort of thing, I still feel like I'm reinventing the wheel because every single initiative, every single experience is unique and different. And it is a special snowflake because it brings a bunch of different complexities to it because humans are complex. And if I had the ability to really say, here are all the things that work in these sorts of constraints and conditions, and I'm able to knock it out of the park every single time, I feel like I'd start to be indispensable in my organization. And I could really shift the work that I'm actually doing and be a performance analyst and not a learning and development specialist. So I want to just reiterate this last piece before we break for today's episode and just remind you that if evaluation keeps ending in just a verdict, it's never going to lead to improvement. It's never going to lead to innovation, and it's never going to lead to growth. Better performance doesn't actually start with better answers. It starts with better questions. And once we start asking better questions, everything else changes. So friends, I want you to really think about, what's a question I could ask from the latest program that I'm evaluating that's going to help unlock more of the why of the program, or the why of the verdict, or the why of the outcome. Start small, start there. And if you're interested in learning more, make sure you come check out the collective, where we really are reframing you from did it work to looking at so many other questions. And until next time, my friends, I'll catch you all on the next episode. Bye.